So Taylor,
Uh,
why did you choose violence?
Well, you see, I kept having Dragon Maid summoned on me and bouncing my cards, and then Dry Trauma was just a pain in my rear. So I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna commit genocide today,
Monkey foot.
and no one else has fun. I can't have fun.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And today we have my buddy Taylor's Qliphort deck that he's been playing on the ladder and just got to platinum with. He had a bunch of variety of matchups against a bunch of different decks. Ended up going 14-2. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Taylor, why don't you tell us about your deck?
Yeah. So just today I decided to play Qliphort just because I noticed a lot of the decks have a lot of weakness climbing up here. So I'm like, you know what? A strong anti-meta deck that has them mostly consistent variety. I think Qliphort scores a pretty solid deck just because of all the floodgates that are available on Master Duel. And on top of that, a lot of the monsters, even though base monsters are normal summonable, are very hard to get over climbing up. So that's basically my reason why I decided to play Qliphort today.
Yeah, the floodgates are pretty nasty. It's crazy how
Yeah.
low rarity they are too.
Yeah,
Like,
that
yeah, go ahead.
that's kind of drove me to pick them up as well. I mean, Skill Drain and Rivalry being SRs, and all the Clees being very easily accessible. Aside from just one of them, and that was just towers, and that was just a one of you play. And the staples were universal between more of my decks, so I mean, it was relatively pretty easy to put together.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump into the card by card then and see about these ratios that you're playing.
Yeah. So 3 Scout, 1 Monolith, so just the standard package. I mean, Scout's just an excellent searcher. Then I play the 3 Carrier, the 3 Helix, the 2 Disc, the 2 Shell, the 3 Stealth, and the 1 Towers. And then for just the basic hand traps, I only played Maxi. And then as for the spells, the 3 Summoners are 3 Pot of Extravagance, 3 Sacrifice, and then 1 Laser Clip for the double summon. And the traps, the 1 Cleese End, the 2 Judgment, 2 Strike, 2 Rivalry, 3 Skill Drain, and then 1 Emptiness. And then because I played Extravagance, I didn't really matter what was in the extra deck, aside from Genius, but Genius was pretty rare to come out, considering that most of the time you just stick with 1 or 2 Clees on the board at once.
Okay. Um, yeah, so looking through the deck, I see that there's a lot of cards that are at 3. There's a lot of cards that are at 1. How did you feel about the Qliphort Towers in your deck?
I thought it was a really solid card, although it does require a lot of resources to get out. That's why I included the 1 copy of Cleese End, because it's treated as 3 tributes for one of the summons. And on top of that, the trap card does add a blanket protection when it's summoned for all Clee thrown traps. So sometimes I did actually get lightning stormed and dustered. So having that on board that offered a secondary body and complete protection really did add another layer of you could say consistency to the deck, because a lot of my opponents didn't anticipate it. That
Okay. And
blanket
then,
completion.
which card in the deck is Cleese End? I can't actually see your cursor, so
Sorry,
could you
right
click on
here,
it? Okay.
normal trap card right here.
Clee Life End. Oh, yeah, so this is good against a lot of the back row removal options. I saw through while you were playing some games earlier that your opponents would Duster, and then you'd chain this card and basically fully protect all of your scales and just keep your board for the next turn while really not losing anything. So it seemed really good as like a one of in there.
Exactly. More than one, I think, is definitely excessive, because when you activate this card, you should already be ready for, to have some of the towers.
Okay. And then looking at your Floodgate lineup, you're playing 2 copies of Rivalry, right? Or is this, yeah, Rivalry,
Yeah,
3
two
Skill
rivalry.
Drain, and 1 Vanities.
Correct.
How are you feeling about these Floodgates?
Skill Drain was a complete blowout, because obviously with the Cleese, whenever you can just normal summon without tribute, it makes them huge boss monsters. I mean, a 2400 attack is huge, and especially with most of the decks here, they're very effect reliant, where mine are not. Basically, I contribute them from the field and get their effects regardless, so the on-field effects didn't matter. So Skill Drain was definitely MVP today, considering the fact.
Nice.
Which
And
is
then
really good.
how did you feel about Rivalry on the ladder? Because you have the option of playing that or goes in even.
Rivalry was pretty good, I'd say, going up to a certain point, because I did face a lot of decks that they only had one type, so I did find it was kind of dead most of the time, especially against like Dragon Maid and Thunder
Mm.
Dragon because they're all dragons or they're all this. So it was dead a couple of times, but facing the rogue decks, it was phenomenal. I mean, and even against Striker, I played against a couple of times. I mean, summoning one monster and they couldn't summon the other one was definitely gave me an advantage.
All right, cool. And then overall, it seems like you have a lot of consistency cards in this deck between the Scout, the Summoner's Art, and the Pot of Extravagance. Did you find yourself? Oh, and the Maxi as well. I guess you could
Yeah,
consider that a consistency card.
yeah.
Did you how consistent were your openings in this deck? Like what was your normal like turn 1, turn 2 plays that you would do?
Yeah, I'd probably say, I mean, the deck's pretty linear, but as for the consistency, I definitely saw extravagance most of my games, and then Summoners Art really helped because basically, essentially, with that and that, I had around 6 copies of Scout, and once Scout was there, I could add anything I wanted. So definitely, it was more of a case by case scenario in terms of that as well. But overall consistency, I mean, I saw my traps a fair amount. I didn't see too many or too less. So I mean, overall, the deck, I definitely think yes, it's 42, but for how many cards searched, I definitely think that it was a good ratio.
Okay. And looking at your extra deck, it's a little bit of
card,
a mismatch of
card
cards.
salad.
I see you got
Yeah,
the 3 double helix in there.
it's my
Yeah,
MVP boy.
nice. Um, did the extra deck ever come up, or was it always just genius and nothing else?
No, genius, nothing else, because the Cleese lock you out of literally everything. So it was just cards I could find,
Okay,
essentially.
cool. Um, yeah. So when you were playing against your online matchups, we have the list of matchups that you won against, and then the matchups that you lost against.
Mhm.
So going down the list, there's a good variety of decks here. Some off meta, some rogue. Like we had Abyss Actors, Monarchs, 2 Thunder Dragon Winds, played against Dragon Maid, True Draco, Border Gren Stun, Crystal Beast, Plant Link Spam, Unchained, Striker, Danger Dark World, and then your 2 losses were against a Sky Striker deck and an Adignister deck. Um,
Mhm.
Across those matchups, what do you think your deck plays the best against versus what do you think you kind of have a rough time against?
I'd probably say the easiest time I would have is with going rogue. I mean, monarchs were pretty easy because I'm also playing a stun deck, so
Mhm.
it didn't really hurt my deck. And when they storm forth my cards, I could just tribute off their stuff as well.
Oh, the helix
Same
and the
with
carrier,
border.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and same thing with border, True Draco. Anything that's essentially control, it rolls in with me because my deck doesn't have a lot of resources that I need to use, and especially because, like I said, all my stuff wants to negate the board, and same thing with theirs. So basically, their cards worked in my favor some of the times. I definitely say some of my harder matchups were Sky Striker to a point, just because if they, when first, my monsters obviously are unaffected by monsters, but not spells. So with their Widow Anchor and their um, the other spell card that basically pops myself, Maneuver, that was gave me a
Afterburner?
bit of a hard. Yeah, thank you. Afterburner gave it a little bit of hard time, but the rest of them, they were pretty easy once I had an established board. My losses were because I did go second, because basically, obviously, being a control deck, you need to set up your board, and them going first, especially with big beaters, that was by far the hardest I can get over, because I think the biggest you can get is like 33 with a disc with the scales correctly and the equip card, and having a fourth that doesn't attack monster, nothing the deck can basically do against it.
Oh yeah, the arrival Adignister being
Yeah.
completely unaffected. It's
Yeah,
just a bigger towers.
a
So
bigger version of my card, yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So that being said, did you have any other changes or things that you might have wanted to update in this deck? Other cards you might want to try out going forward, or other recommendations that you might have for some of the cards in the deck?
Yeah, I
I know
think,
looking at some of these URs, like Judgments and Strikes, might
yeah.
be kind of like they're good to have across the board, but like say you
Mhm.
didn't have those cards, what might
You
you
want to make
play
it more
instead?
budget.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the two I definitely could recommend, I think, going forward, if I want to make it more budget, would definitely be lose one turn, which I believe is a super rare. Let me just double check before I commit to my words.
I think it's lose and not lost.
Oh yeah.
think it's the word one spelled out.
Oh, is it?
I think so, yeah.
Let me just double check. Don't mind me.
Lose one turn's a trap, isn't it?
Oh, it's a trap card. You
Yeah,
are
yeah.
definitely correct. Professionals, don't worry. Right, no, so it was okay, lose one turn.
Oh, it
So,
is.
yeah.
It is with the one. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, being an SR is super more accessible.
Mm.
And then just because obviously it's just another floodgate that prevents stuff from being summoned, on top of that, it does negate everything else. So it really does help with your Cleese coming out of full power. And another one is Soul Transition, just because you can almost summon a Clee, you might have a bad hand, but having a Helix or Carrier on board, Transition tributes a card to draw two,
Mm.
and you get the Clee effect when it's tributed. So it's really good to basically onboard disruption plus set up your hand with more consistency cards, like maybe you draw into a Maxi or the Scout, or you play more hand traps than I do, and it definitely gives you more of a fighting chance.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting card.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do like that it turns all of your the smaller Clees into actual removal options while also being like a reckless greed. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
How did you feel about you said you really like the extravagance in this deck, right?
Correct.
Do you at any point do you wish that it was a card like Card of Demise instead? Because I know that was a version of Klee that ran around way back, or I think
Yeah,
when Card of Demise first came out.
I definitely think to a point I did, and the reason why I still like extravagance over Card Demises back then with Card Demise, it was nice to you have your scales were separate, so you had more cards to set.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if you draw all monsters, and it's definitely just a really tough time where extravagance, because you don't draw, you always add, so it doesn't really conflict with uh
Mm.
the essence of drawing, because
The only card that
Scout
conflicts is
add,
Monolith.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
hmm Monolith, they didn't get off too much. It was maybe
Yeah.
once or twice a game. So
Okay.
that's too bad.
All right. Cool. Did you have any final thoughts on the deck before we close out here?
No, I mean, like I said, I think the deck is definitely really nice, especially being an anti-meta deck. I mean, you can always substitute these cards. So I definitely think it'd be a good budget control deck for a good price, because most of it you just buy from one pack, and they're all normals and rares.
They're all super rares. So. Really, the only mandatory cards in this deck are what, the 3 copies of Scout, the 2 copies of Disc, and the 3 copies of Genius. And you're just playing 3 Genius because of the extravagance, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it does help. Sometimes just because it adds more cards to your hand, but I definitely think it's more like a more card, you know. But other than that, I mean, the deck was pretty solid, treating me well all day today, so I have no complaints with it.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much for sharing this deck profile with us. I think this was one of the decks that I kind of wanted to build, but was also tentative to. I used to play Qliphorts back in the day myself, and it's a lot of fun. I think it's very beginner friendly. You get to summon big monsters, like I think a lot of the people returning to Yu-Gi-Oh like, and then flip floodgates, which, I mean, it's a little bit frustrating, but you know, they're a part of the game, and there's so many of them running around that you're basically expected to have counters for them at this point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Taylor. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and then thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you next time.